Hi, welcome to Chad Silversmithing. First, thanks for coming by. I really appreciate you visiting my channel. If you wouldn't mind hitting the like button and leaving a comment before you leave today, that helps out my channel a lot. I also love just hearing what you have to say about things, so thanks for those in advance. Today I'm going to do just kind of a little dainty ring. It's working with some little tiny wires, and we'll see how it comes out. It's kind of a copy of one my wife bought years ago, and I always kind of liked it, but I've never tried to make one quite similar to it. So we'll see how it comes out. I think I can pull this one off. We'll see. But before we do, I wanted to thank all my YouTube subscribers. We just passed 6,000 subscriptions. That's great. Thank you guys. Keep promoting my channel. I'd love to get it up to 10. So, but thank you for your support and your kind words and all those, the financial support that you guys have given me over the past. I also wanted to thank my patrons over on Patreon. They're paying for my premium content, and I am so grateful for that. You guys are my bread and butter, and I appreciate all of the contributions you've given to me, as well as the interactions we have over there. I really enjoy those because you're a nice group of people. So thank you for that. Let's get started on this project. Alright, this is one of my design books. I'm almost done with this one. I've pretty much filled it up. I ordered a couple of the other ones with different covers, which are behind me. I'm going to have to start using one of those pretty soon. This is what I drew up today. By the way, these are available on my merch store. I like them because they have this little grid on them, which helps me to keep things sort of symmetrical. I have this little amber cabochon. It's about I think it's a 10 by 12 if I remember. And I was going to set it in a little ring that has some little delicate sort of filigree looking stuff on top of a piece of kind of skinny sheet, and that's going to kind of elevate the bezel that I'm going to make for this to sit in. And then we'll take I'm actually going to take a little piece of this is some 12 gauge square wire that I rolled out on the rolling mill to flatten it. I'm going to cut it with the saw down in the middle and do a split band like this. I've never done one of those on the channel before, so I probably ought to do that once in a while. So we'll do that. But yeah, so let's make a bezel for this guy first. I'm going to use 3/16 inch fine silver bezel strip. It's 26 gauge, which is a little bit thicker. I like that. If you haven't been to my channel before, I use hard silver sheet solder and a spray-on flux called My-T-Flux. If you haven't worked with amber before, amber is really soft, so you have to be a little careful about scratching it. It's fossilized tree resin. True Baltic amber, if I remember right, is 60 or 80 million years old or something like that. There's other fossil tree resins that show up on the market occasionally. Most are not quite as old as Baltic amber and are oftentimes called copal. It's pretty much the same, it's just not as old, so it hasn't gone through as many chemical changes over time. It's more like 10 or 12 million years old. I know Colombia in South America has some, and I think Dominican Republic, if I remember right, has some. And I'm not sure the age of the Dominican stuff. I know the Colombian stuff is, or at least just from memory, I think it was 10 or 12 million years old. So, funny thing about amber is when the movie Jurassic Park first came out, there was a huge run on amber because of the interest in it that movie generated. And so as soon as that happened, then all sorts of fake amber started showing up on the market, more than it ever had. And so you have to be a little bit careful. I don't think it's as big of a deal now as it used to be. But if you ever see one of those guys selling the big chunks of amber with tarantulas in it and stuff like that, that's probably fake. something like that is pretty rare. Amber is one of the older ornamental stones. It's not really a stone, but since it has organic origins, but I think Paleolithic people traded it and used it for ornamentational purposes in Europe. To put a bottom on this, but I want it to be see-through, so I'm going to do just a little step made out of something, and I think I'm going to use I use 16 gauge wire here, if I can find a little bit. I found a little piece laying around. We'll see if this is long enough. This is going to be close. Yeah, I think that'll be long enough, just barely. Cut off the ends. You could, if you wanted to, put a bottom on this and saw at the center if you prefer. This is one way to make an open back bezel. That is so close, it's scary. That was just pure luck that it's that close. I just need to take just a tiny bit more off, I think, and it'll be perfect. That's pretty darn good. Okay, let's solder that to the bottom. Always want to make sure when you're doing one of these, well, number one, make sure that your wire doesn't have any wobbles in it. So let's make sure that's sitting pretty flat. Then I'm going to cut myself some solder. I'm just going to make a little oval out of these pieces of solder. File this flat. I'm likely going to file the top down a little bit too before I set the stone, just so it's a height that I like. That makes a pretty nice flat bottom once you file it flush. So that'll be a good platform for the stone, hopefully. All right. I was kind of figured this out. This is the length of the size of a bezel I needed for that. And I decided to use this part down here. It looks like sheet, but it's actually wire that I rolled out again and flattened. You could certainly use sheet. It came out to be about 24 gauge after I squished it flat. And then I trimmed it so that it wasn't very tall. And this is going to be this piece right here. I made it about 5 millimeters longer than the bezel. I think at 5 or 6, if I remember right. So I'll try to give it just a little bit more of a curve. I just basically, what I did to curve it initially was lay it on the table flat like this. Just grab it and then kind of pull it sideways a little bit. It doesn't have to curve very much. This is going to be, I want this to tilt inwards just a little bit, the decorations that I'm going to solder to the top of this. And I'm going to use 20 gauge wire to make these things, and then probably some little balls out of some scrap, little tiny balls to solder in there. And then what we'll do is we'll turn this into an oval shape, and it should have a taper on it because I've curved it and I made it a little bit longer. And even if it doesn't, we can taper it a little bit more manually so that the bezel will fit right down in there and solder to it. So it should be kind of elevated above the other platform with some see-through area between it, like a kind of a lattice or a scaffolding, sort of, something like that. I took a piece of wire that was just a little bit longer than it. This is that 20 gauge wire I was talking about, and I bent it so that it would be like that. And so now I'm going to solder it to there in those 4 spots. That would be our next step. And then I'm going to add some little decorations that I'll make right there out of the same kind of wire. I'm not sure what I'm going to do yet, but this is one of those situations where pick soldering will come in handy. We're dealing with pretty small components as far as the mass of them, and so they're easy to get too hot and melt. And with pick soldering, if you've never seen it before, I pick up a little bit of solder on the end of the pick. It allows me to control exactly how much I want. Heat the piece up to the soldering point and touch it where you want it to go, and it should just flow right on there, as long as it's at that melting temperature of the solder, so, which in this case is 1450 Fahrenheit. I'm not sure what the equivalent is in Celsius. I have to look that up. Let's try making some little swirls or something. It seems a little big to me, but let's see. hard to keep track of little tiny components like this. Especially when you have big chubby fingers like I do. So if I get them to be that size, I like that better. It's a little bit smaller. I'm going to try and make 4 of those. Try to kind of do something like that maybe. And then I think I was going to make just a tiny ball. Put it at the bottom of each one of these maybe. Just for some texture. I'm just going to have to reposition all these anyway. Charcoal blocks usually produce the best balls for some reason. Something about their heat characteristics makes the bottoms nice and flat. Let's try pieces about that long. I think those might be too big. Let me try one smaller. Let's try those 2 sizes and see. You guys can probably barely see these, but they're not much difference. Let's see which one looks better here. A tiny one there, and a big one there. Honestly, I kind of like the bigger one better. You can see it more. Let's go with the bigger ones. Okay, so I've lined up the balls here, 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 and here. I'm going to use some of that little tiny solder again. Go ahead and just, these are all going to roll around when I do this. That one's going to be a stinker, apparently. This is why pick soldering is handy, stuff like this, because I can just go boop. Boop. The booping noise is optional. Boop. Okay, this one didn't quite flow all the way, so I'm going to make sure he gets hot enough to flow. There we go. Now we got to find out if we can solder these ends together without having anything fall apart. Otherwise known as the fun part. Actually, on the ends of these, I'm kind of bend them so they're kind of pointing straight towards each other, like this. And I'm guessing I'm going to have to cut off a little bit of this wire here. I think I'm just going to pick it on those 2 spots a little bit, and then we'll round it out a bit. Somebody in the comments today said that when I hum something, the the closed captioning says the word music, which is a stretch, I would say. That made me laugh, though. Just kind of filing the bottom flat a little bit. I'm making it round first, and then I'm going to make it oval. I'm guessing I'm going to, I don't know. Normally I would put the solder joint on one of the longer sides, but that's probably the most irregular spot, and I think it'd be more hidden on the end because people tend to look at the side of the long stone, I think. So let's see how that works if I put those kind of like that. I want to get this to fit right in there. So I could push it through, I guess. See how that works. That seems like a good idea. So I think the trick will be to get this to stay, you know, there's a little bit of a gap between the bottom of this one and the top of this thing here, which is what I wanted because I wanted to elevate the stone and have a see-through area so some light gets through it. That'll look pretty cool. But keeping it in that position while I solder this on, I have to figure out how to do that. So I think if I sweat a bunch of solder along the base of this bezel here, so there's already some solder in place, and then I get this positioned where I need to, and then just heat it up to the solder flow point again. That solder that's already in place will reflow and attach to the other side. And then we'll hopefully have not much movement or anything, it'll just kind of stick. I just had a thought. I know. What if we, since the solder really won't stick very well to this stuff, like on T-pins, if we use that as a way to gauge how far apart they are, run one or two of those through there. Okay, I feel like that's positioned okay, so let's give it a little heat and see what happens. I need to think about the band now. Let's find where I lost it. Here it is. Okay, so this is like I said, a piece of 12 gauge that's been run through the rolling mill. If you don't have a rolling mill, you can pound things flat too. That works fine, just not quite as regular. So I measured in, I think, 7 millimeters, and then I'm going to take my saw and try and do a real narrow straight line down to about 7 millimeters so I can kind of flare it open a bit. And we'll go from there. Welcome to the messy sawing area. Okay, I think I have a number 1 on here, so I'm going to put a little bit smaller blade. Let's go with a 00. Question is, can I start this in the middle? And can I keep it in the middle? these spread open a little bit. Usually kind of use your flat nose pliers to kind of be a little wedge to push in there. Give a little quick file. So I'm going to mount it, on the sides of this thing. So in order to do that, I'm going to have to file these vertically like this, so they match up nicely with the vertical sides of this little piece of wire down here. So I end up doing this a little bit. Ideally, I'm trying to find a place here where the band and the bezel will kind of sit on top of this. I'll try and pick that on there. So I think we got a good solid solder joint. This will I'll round this out better again once it's cleaned up and everything. The other thing I might do is, I have enough room here to make this a little bit saddle shaped on the underside so that it fits the finger a little bit better, since it's kind of a smallish size. So if I'm going to taper that upwards a little bit so it gets thinner up here and it'll sit nicer on the finger. But I think we're done, other than setting the stone and polishing. So I will let that pickle for a while, and then we'll polish it, and then we'll set that stone. So, all right. So I polished it up, and I'm mostly cleaned up here. I might need to wash it off again one more time with some hot soapy water, but I pushed the stone in there, and I was about to go ahead and set it. It was a little snug of a fit, so I did a little dremeling on the inside to remove just a tiny bit of material. Now I'm just going to use the flat side of my chain nose pliers here to push it up against there, kind of gently. Like I said, with amber is soft and pretty easy to scratch. So I'm trying to be careful so I don't slip. Like that. I'm just going to do a light little burnish. Little ring. I think that one turned out nicely. I'm pleased with that one. I'll probably do that again at some point. I'll do some final polishing and take some nice pictures and put them at the end. Okay, well, that was the dainty amber ring. I hope you enjoyed that one. I thought it was kind of fun to make. If you did enjoy it, make sure to hit the like button before you leave. That helps me out a lot. And please leave a comment. I'd love to hear what you think. Suggestions for videos, constructive criticism is fine. But yeah, I like your input. So I'd also suggest you check out my playlist section on my channel, because I've split up my videos into useful playlists. Like, say you're kind of a beginner and you want to just stick with beginner projects, there's a beginner playlist there, as well as an intermediate and a more difficult projects playlist. They're also split into pendant, rings, bracelets, and other kinds of stuff like that too. So that helps you to find what you're looking for. After you watch a few videos, why don't you consider subscribing to my channel? I'd love to have you as a subscriber. So check out the video description down below for various other relevant links: my Patreon, Buy Me a Coffee, my website, or my merch store if you want to get yourself one of those nice little notebooks or a coffee cup or something like that. So thank you for coming by again. Take care. Happy silversmithing.